This week, we're starting a whole new series. We're going to be doing a CG head replacement of a robot guy. This right here is the plate that we will be using today in order to create our face replacement shot. I believe this is going to be a fun one. We've got Luke right here at the from CG VFX at the bar, just wiping it down. We're going to be painting out his head and then replacing it. Let's actually, we're going to view this correct. We're going to be replacing his head with the robotic head. So the first thing that we actually have to do is we're going to actually have to track the head and then replace it. The first thing I'd like to do is we're going to treat the head as if it is a land piece, if you will. And instead of us tracking the head's movement, we're going to be tracking the camera's movement and then placing that like a cube or something like that to visualize it. But for right now, let's go ahead and we're going to add in a camera tracker. To track out this shot. So as I was saying, we kind of need to track just the head movement here. And so we'll do this by taking our piece of footage and we're going to roto out the section that is just the head. So let's create this mask here and then we will roto out the section that we want to track here on the first frame. I'm going to just select really roughly kind of like the head movement here. Select everything now, and then we'll just go to the last frame, move this over. And this doesn't have to be super precise, but you know, one thing to watch out for is that the collar is going to be moving different than the head itself. Just going to go every few frames and just make sure we've got a keyframe in here. Mostly tracking the sections of the face that'll be like the lips because he's not moving too much. It's really nice if your actor does have motion tracking dots on them, but in our particular case, he did not. Okay, great. Now with this, I'm going to just pre-multiply it. And then we've got our roto plugged in. Now under our settings, if we preview our features, this is all of the areas in which it's going to track inside of Nuke. You'll notice that it is tracking everywhere, including our face, which we only want to be tracking the face. So if we go back over to our camera tracker, use our mask, and then select source alpha, or it might be source alpha inverted. Oh, no, sorry, not source, mask alpha. And then we'll want to invert that, of course. Now it's only going to be tracking the area in which the face is. All right, so now with that selected, the other things to make sure of in your settings here is that we are not using lens distortion because otherwise that's going to throw off our camera track. We also can just use an unknown constant because we know that the lens is not adjusting. And then with that being said, the only thing we really have to be concerned about is this background here because we really only want to be tracking this face. Now, if we track this, you'll notice that all of these tracking markers are moving around with the face quite successfully. We might need to make some more adjustments here a little bit closer to the face. And, oh, you know what's also not a bad idea? Let's swap that to a planar tracker and then just track. Fail to initialize camera motion. Try manually defining the reference frame for the solve. Okay. Where do you do that? I actually don't think. Oh, set reference frame. Here we go. Let's set frame 1000 as our reference frame. Let's clear our solve and then solve again. Beautiful. Go to our auto track settings and then let's slim that down a little bit. We're going to, first of all, create a cube in the area in which his face is. So if we go ahead and add in a cube, go view our scan line and plug that into our scene. For visualization, I'm going to create a checkerboard on this card just so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to set this up here and then we will rotate it. I'm going to move this about here for the head position just for testing purposes. And then inside of our point cloud here, I'm going to set the render position of this to off. Okay, so there's a couple things that are throwing it off. I believe it's probably the eye blinking. And for our planar track here, this is all pretty sweet. Let's go in and create a couple more Bezier curves. Well, now it is working. Fantastic. So the Bezier 2 is above. Why was it not above before? I feel like it was. Okay, so that's subtracted now. And then we'll see the alphas here. So if I go back in, I'm going to clear our solve, clear our tracks, go into our settings, preview again, and then now we'll notice that there is no tracks on the eyes. Now you can see it has tracks on the eyes. I'm just showcasing that right here. And then, of course, as soon as we have that on, it removes the tracks from where the eyeballs are. So that's really important for us. Let's try this again. We'll hit the track button. So we're just going to delete now anything that could be slipping. I'm just going to delete the rejected here. Should clean that up quite a bit. And then we'll go ahead and create our scene plus again and plug our head back in. Okay, how does that track look, guys? I think that's looking pretty clean. There's a couple things that we're going to have to do in order for this shot to work. First of all, we need to remove our actor here because our actor is in the way and the robot head is smaller. I don't know if you guys seen the Chappie head before, but it is very not wide, thin. So we're going to actually have to remove the background and track that back on. And then also his clothing, his beard is on this actor is going in front of the shirt, and we are currently missing the inside of the shirt if our robot head is to sit on the inside of that. Okay, so let's create ourselves a clean plate. I'm going to, that's our camera track. Let's go ahead and just add in some dot over here. And then I'm going to add in a right node, and then we're going to output this. Probably this frame right here is fine. Let's go ahead and just render this out, and we're going to create a matte painting. I'm just going to output it as a matte painting color space, which will just be sRGB. So that should be fine. And we're just going to do the first frame. Let's just output that and then open up Photoshop. Okay, great. Inside of Photoshop, we're going to use some AI. Ooh, scary. We're just going to select our guy here. This is how lazy I am with clean plating things these days. I could spend, you know, the extra 30 minutes just doing this myself, or I could take 10 seconds and do this and it works just as well. Just generate, paint him out. I think we like this. I'm just going to get rid of the glass completely, honestly. I'm going to get rid of our guy over here as well. We'll go ahead and export this out as another PNG. And then I'm going to re-import this. And then for purposes of our own... what's the best way to do this? Honestly, it's probably taking our digital map painting we already created. Let's just import that. And then we're going to do some manual paint out work. So I'm going to put our guy back in. And we're just going to select the head. Let's go ahead and just select everything here. I'm going to delete it real quick. And then we're going to bring it back in. Now, using this quick selection tool, this will probably be the easiest way of doing this. Probably actually just... I always find that like what ends up happening is if you have trouble selecting stuff, you end up just wasting more time than it's worth. Okay. We'll convert that to a rasterized layer, and then we'll do select invert. I think this is the invert selection button. Delete everything else. Great. So now we just have the collar here, which is just this layer. We're painting back in. Do I do this at every frame? No, we're just going to make a single kind of clean plate of what the collar selection is here. And then we can track that back onto his body. We're not going to need to do anything crazy. Right now, we're basically just trying to create the foreground of his shirt as well as the background. Let's just see if AI gets this. I don't think it's going to, but I'm trying to paint this color in here. It's pretty close. Find sometimes things that are close are better than not. Just going to keep trying to generate, see if we can get that to work a little bit better. Let's see. What do we have here? I just want to see. This is the front foreground pieces. Let's just merge this all together. We'll merge the layers. And then I'm going to, let's do a feather selection here of like 5 pixels. And then we're just going to hand grab this collar without being too janky. Wow, that was really janky. We're going to try it one more time. Okay, so that is our foreground piece of our shirt here. And that's just that front section. Now we need to create the back side of the shirt. So now if we create a whole new layer here and we select kind of like the background or the back side of this collar, and let's do this color. I like that color. And that's the inside of the shirt. And we're going to just start painting, boys. Great. And from this, we could then use some generative fill here. Let's do this all on top of it. Just hit generative fill and just see what happens. And now we have this, which we can go in and do our quick selection on. Let's just see. We also have this front piece here. So let's just take all of this. We'll merge this together. And then we need to, if possible, select this front piece and remove it. Beautiful. So there we go. We have our collar of our front of our collar and then the back of it. The whole idea being that this is just the front of the shirt and then this being our back of the shirt. Okay, now for our undershirt, I'm going to select our color here and then we're just going to continue this edge. I think for our front piece of our shirt, let's select a little bit more of this. Let's just grab the rest of the straps here and just want to make sure that we have this whole front section of the shirt. So Control C, Control V, perfect, perfect. Place this below everything else, hide it again. And that way we kind of like have that whole section of the front of the shirt. And again, we're going to need to output this. So we're going to output this to two different plates. One is everything in the front and the other is everything in the back. We'll call this front 2. And then this will be called back. So let's just save the back first. So we'll do File, export this as a PNG. Then we'll hide that. And now we'll just select just the front. So we're hiding the back of the collar now. So we're only using the front. Go ahead and export this to another PNG. Okay, now inside of our Nuke project, we now need to track this guy so that way we can actually place our shirt on correctly and then also track on the back of it. This will require us to do a little bit of cleanup as we're going about this, but let's just move that up there so that way it's just a little cleaner. Probably put that over there. Fantastic. Now, let's go ahead and track the front of this. If you guys have Mocha or whatever you have, you can then do that. I'm going to use a planar tracker. And I'm just going to track the front of his bow tie and shirt because this is all that we really need. So we'll just select that. Make sure that's set to 1. And it is using perspective as well as everything else. Which is good. So I'm going to set current frame to reference frame. So frame 1000 is our reference frame. And then we're just going to track that forward. This section here. And actually, you know what? Go into your tracking settings. And then we're going to say adjust for luminance changes. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and output this as a tracker. And inside of this tracker, selecting everything as our options here. We can then go ahead and select everything, select stabilize, and just plug that directly into our footage. And hopefully, under our stabilize, set our reference, under our tracker, go to transform, and then yeah, our reference frame is set to 1000. And so now our entire shirt should be stabilized. Which it's not perfectly, and you can tell because my mouse is definitely stabilized, but the bow tie is moving around on us, which is not good. So let's go ahead and make some adjustments for it. Let's create a new planar tracker, and let's select this guy's head again. And I'm going to let's try just doing that. Is that not working? Oh, I just hit the play button, that's why. Let's try tracking it again. His beard is moving around, so that could throw off our track. But this time I am just trying to do a transform, scale, and rotation. So hopefully that works a little better. Our stabilization is still set up from before. Okay, great. So this is stabilized. Let's select everything again, and then we're going to reapply our motion with a match move. This will basically allow us to stabilize our footage, apply whatever changes we want to it, and then reapply the motion back on top of everything else. So, with that being said, we have our guy here tracked. Let's just say we want to paint out the background of our footage, which we do. I'm going to use another tracker. We're just tracking everything right now, guys. Plug that in, and let's go ahead and add a tracker on one of these Coke bottles because, you know, it's Coca-Cola, guys. This isn't anything else. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so all right, so this now I've stabilized the background. Let's go ahead and place our clean plate in that we just created. Let's now just roto out the areas that we need, and then we'll be merging that back over top of everything. Let's give ourselves some more space because we're cramping up over here. Okay, so in our stabilized footage now, we're just gonna actually go to our first frame. We basically want to remove just the area where our head is. So let's select all the areas in which the head possibly could be going. I'm just going to select that whole section there. Do just pre-multiply that to RGBA, and then now we've just got our background here. And I'm going to merge this back over top of everything. Now the reason why we did a separate track here than from the actual body track is because the background's going to be moving differently than the actual foreground stuff. So that's good. I'm going to just throw a blur in after that. Just feather that out just in case there's any weird bugs that we're having. It's really nice to make sure that the edges are feathered just in case there is a hard line anywhere. That way we're not seeing anything weird. Okay, so with our tracker now, I'm also going to select everything, and then we're just going to reapply the match move on it. Beautiful. Now his head's gone in the motion of the shot. So we're just using that clean plate. Now we need to create the front collar as well as the back collar. In order of operations, we'll probably want the back collar in first, so that way we're merging the front collar over top of everything. So we actually now have our footage stabilized again. And again, the reference frame is set to 1000, so that way we are on frame 1000 with our clean plates that we're creating. Let's load in our back collar of our shirt. Now, if you notice, this has its alpha set up, so let's go ahead and just use a merge. Now we can take this and then just merge this over top of our stabilized piece of footage, and then that should put the back collar in. And we're going to do the exact same thing with our front collar, or our front of our shirt. Another merge node, mask the alpha to it, and then another merge. And that should give you the front. Okay, and then reapply our match move now. And we're going to have to fix some problems because his shirt is obviously distorting in certain areas, but the overall top of the collar is now correct. So that actually, we're slowly getting there, guys, one step at a time. Now we have to basically reapply kind of like that movement of the shirt back on top of everything. I think the easiest, so we could do it a couple different ways. I think maybe one of the best ways to go about this is just using, so you can use grid warp and you can hand grid warp the shirt to match the lines, or we can do another method which I actually quite like, which is using basically a smart vectors and then reapplying the motion of the shirt back on top of our clean plate that we did. We're going to do this on top of our stabilized footage specifically. So let's just create a dot here, and then plug that into our stabilized footage. Actually, probably copy this. One second. Let's copy this and then take our original plate and do it that way. So we have our original plate with our head. All right, so with our stabilized footage over here, we're going to need to create smart vectors. So let's do a smart vector where it's going to create vectors from nothing. We go view that real quick. You'll notice that we're not seeing anything, and that's good. That's fine, because basically what we're going to be doing is generating ourselves some vectors. We're going to change this vector detail to be a higher number, like 0.9, and then the strength will keep at 1.5. I'll keep this reference frame at frame 1000, though it is a good idea to probably do it somewhere in the middle of your shot. But for us, because I created all of our matte paintings on frame 1000, I'm just going to keep it as frame 1000. So do export a right node, and then I'm going to save this into a folder. So we'll go back to our probably create another folder over here called pre-render, and then I'll create a new folder inside of here called smart vector. Copy that, paste it, and just save that as an EXR. I'm going to say create directories as well, but this will be rendering it out as our scene linear. It's fine. Do global. Okay, so I created smart vectors, but specifically not of the shot, but of the area that is stabilized. And that's because we're basically pasting this on that stabilized section, same as before here. And so I need to distort this footage based off of that. So if we use vector distort, type in distort, vector distort, there we go. We can use the smart vectors from this right node, the source from this material here, and then we'll set to current frame. That's all good to go. I'll just set that to 1 so we can see one thing at a time. We plug this A position into this vector distort here, and then now our shirt here will be distorting based off of the movement that's behind it, not just the track itself. So it's both moving with the body, but also it's being distorted by the body behind it. So when those straps are moving in and out and all that stuff, it's actually moving our foreground elements as well. I don't usually use the ST map. I usually just plug in a vector distort, and I'll plug the smart vector into that, the source into that, and then this into the vector distort. And then if we just use the warped source, usually this works really nice. And so basically this is going to distort our footage. We're going to do another pre-render here, boys. Save your work. Just go to this right input now. Set this to RGBA. We're going to create a pre-render of everything. So we'll pre-render this out as front collar. Copy that and then paste that. Save that as EXRs. Okay. So then we'll go ahead and say create directory, render that. Okay, we're going to render that out again. Let's do vector distort, crop. Just make sure. We're gonna make sure that this is good. We're just gonna render out this front collar here with RGBA. Just hit that render button. Please render out all 55 frames. All right, now let's load that in. I'm going to set that to auto alpha now. So now you can see it distorts with it perfectly. We still have this line at the bottom, but we can easily get rid of that. I'm not really concerned about that at all. I'm going to also take this number and let's clean up the bottom edge of this, because right now we have this really ugly looking line and we don't really care about this stuff. So we'll do RGBA and then add that in there and then swap this to a stencil. So that way it's erasing it. And then we're just going to blur this quite a bit. So there you go. So that's just going to be kind of like removing the bottom line of this. Just because I don't want to have to deal with issues. Let's just bring that down. Perfect. And for the end of the shot, that's all good. And because it's all stabilized, we really don't have to do all that much. And that then gets merged back over top of everything. So let's go to the end of our shot here. I'm going to try to keep in some of our original stuffs as we're going about this. Okay, we're going to reapply the camera movement that we had because everything was stabilized just then. So now we're going to reapply the movement after the shirt is done. Perfect. So now we have ourselves a headless bartender. Okay. Next up, we now need to comp in a robot head, if you will. So let's go ahead and just crop after this because we're just going to crop after our match move is done. I'm going to save our work as we're going here. So this is all of our clean plating that we're doing. We have this kind of like foreground shirt layer here, as well as the back of our shirt that we have. And that's so that way when we do our robot head, so this is our robot cube that we have. This is not going to be the robot head. We can take this now and we can reapply the motion somewhere else. So let's go ahead and just drag this whole thing down. For testing purposes, I just want to see what everything looks like. And our backdrop that we have here, we're just going to make not visible, so that way it's just the robot head. I'm going to add in a dot below it, and all we have to do is then add a merged layer after this crop. And now you're going to have yourself a robot head that's kind of just floating there. I'm going to remove our tracking dot things from our point cloud. I think that's pretty nice. Let's now take the 3D stuff that we have here and import that into Blender so that way we can make the real magic happen. So I'm going to create a right geo node. This is only possible inside of Nuke X. So if you're a Nuke Indie, you can't do this right geo method here. So that's just something to be aware of. So let's just grab this right geo now, select the file output location, and we have to put today's date in, VFX, material, tracking. We're going to output an Agawa. Okay, so we got geometries, point clouds. We don't really need the point clouds. Cameras, axis. We don't need the axis. We just need cameras and geometry here. Just going to execute, and then let's do global. Oh my gosh, let's make sure we hit save because I am so sick and tired of crashing. Okay, one thing I wanted to note that I noticed last time that we were doing our stream is my color management settings aren't correct. So today we're going to set up color management. This is not part of the tutorial on making a robot head, but it is part of my sanity because I really don't like the color management settings within inside of Blender. They don't work for me. I'm going to import our ABC that we created. So let's go to streams. Let's go to our material here. We'll import our tracking that we created. I'm going to delete our cube, and you'll notice that when it imports our Alembic file, it resets everything to be using the correct frame range of 1000 to 1054 that we got going on here. And if we go ahead and now view our camera, we'll see our cube that we created from before moving all over the place, which is good. That's actually exactly what we wanted. But we do actually want to have our footage so we can see actually what we're doing on top of everything. So let's go ahead and open up Nuke back up again. I don't know why I closed it already. And we have to render out a couple things here, okay? First of which is rendering out a clean plate of our shot. So I'm going to do a couple things, all right? We have our main background plate, which is everything behind the collar, and we have everything in front of the collar. Technically, the collar itself is like its own set of EXRs that we have, which we may end up using, but I actually think that from a perspective of a reference file, it'd probably just be best to have everything here. We're going to now import our reference that we have as a background image. Click Add Image and click Open. Inside of our Streams folder, we'll find a reference that we already rendered out here inside of this folder. Select frame 1000. We'll go scroll all the way down and then select the last frame of the sequence and hit Open. Now, because it's an image sequence and Blender wants everything to start on frame 1, we're actually going to need to make sure that the offset here is correct. I believe if we set the starting frame here to 1, 2, 3, whoops, there we go. And then if we go back one frame, we just want to make sure that we can't see this thing. So let's just go to frame 1001. I don't know why the, oh, that's actually correct. Starting on frame 1000, we've got our image now. And then if you hit the play button, you'll notice everything plays back pretty nicely. And it's behind everything, set to sRGB. Now, I'm going to save our blend file that we have because we're about to do something that may make it so that we can't open Blender back up on today's live stream. I'm going to go and save this under VFX, and then I'm going to call a new folder we will call 3D_work. Now, if you guys are new here, then you guys may not know that we have a Patreon. You can guys grab all of these project files and mess around with them yourself. We're not going to be finishing this till next week. So then if you guys want to download this before then and make whatever you want, go for it. I'll upload all the clean plates and everything so you guys can work with all of that stuff fresh. But this is all set as sRGB, which isn't necessarily correct for the color space that we're using because we are working inside of an ACES pipeline. Blender uses AGX pipeline. It's their own color management based off of the ACES pipeline, and it's slightly different. But because we need everything to be 100% color accurate to what we're doing, we need everything to be working in the same world. Now, I am using a specific ACES pipeline that I downloaded from GitHub. I believe I linked it to the inside the Discord before. I can find it and link it again if anybody has questions of what that is. But I'm going to go ahead and copy our stuff into our new version of Blender, because I did download a new version of Blender, so we actually have to run through this again in order to set everything up. But if we play this back, you'll notice that everything we have inside of our Blender project file is set up correctly. Weirdly, our cube is stationary, but our camera is moving because of the way we tracked everything and set everything up. But we need our color management to be set correctly. So I'm going to close out of Blender. And I'm going to go to my window toolbar thing on my start menu, program files, Blender Foundation. There we go. If we go under 4.3, there we go. Okay. If you go under 4.3 and then 4.3, then data files, you'll see this color management folder. So then you'll notice that this is the default color management settings inside of Blender from Blender. I actually have my own custom color management settings. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into our color management here. We're going to select everything, and we'll save this as a backup, although I don't really use this ever again. But we can save this as a backup. I'm going to move this over into here, and I'm going to create a new folder called backup. Back over inside of our Blender 4.3, we'll see our color management in here. I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. Do this for all items, just delete. Now I already have a backup, so if we ever need it, we can go back there. Now under Blender 4.1, under data files, color management, I have an ACES config file that I can just now copy, go back over into our Blender 4.3, data files, color management, paste. And then just make sure to paste it directly in here. That'll copy our new folders basically into that. Let's go ahead and open up Blender now. And as soon as we open up Blender, we can go over to our color management settings inside of here. And you'll notice now that we have new options. This says ACES at the very top here. And then if I just scroll this down a little bit more so you can see here, the sequencer now says utility sRGB textured. That's perfect. And so now if we go open up our Blender project that we had from before, you'll notice that our color management now gets reset. It now uses sRGB textured. And if we select this as view as render, it will look exactly the same way that it did inside of Nuke before we rendered it out. We're using the exact same color management settings. So now we know that whatever we're seeing inside of our viewport here is exactly what we were seeing inside of our Nuke display viewer. Now that that's all good to go, we can do a couple more things to set up our project so that way next week we could just jump right on into modeling our stuff. I'm going to set this over here to this screen. And I like to then also remove the floor and the XY because that's going to just jump all over the place. And we don't need to see that inside of this window. Probably get rid of relationship lines as well as extras. I'll remove outline selected and really just pretty much everything. We're only wanting to see, just our cube or whatever our render is at that exact moment. So like if we go to render view, I want to be able to see our render there. Next up inside of our properties window, let's go down to our film and then just make sure that we're using transparent. So that way if we are using the render over here, we're able to see our background image that we're using. And this basically will be very useful because when we render this out, we will be rendering out with alpha and then just using that directly inside of our Nuke comp with our composition that we're doing. I like to also set our sequencer setting for color management here. I like to set this as ACES CG. So if we just scroll all the way from the top here, you'll see an option that says ACES CG. And then our viewer transform is set to sRGB, though you could set this to whatever you want. Inside of Nuke, if you want to view this exactly the same way, I am currently setting this to Rec 709 inside of my Nuke viewer instead of the default sRGB. And that's going to just view it slightly different as your viewer transform inside of your project here. So I'll just go ahead and save my changes. That's how you set up your color management inside of Blender and then be able to import your footage from Nuke directly in there. So now we can make all of our changes to our cube here, which, you know, is just kind of sitting here, but then it'll basically transfer over into our character and everything like that. Okay, so we have this clean plate here without our cube in it, and we can model whatever we want now for our robot head. So the idea being that we can just now create a 3D model, place it basically right where that cube is, and then it'll kind of track in. And inside of our comp, we have things separated into different layers. So the front of the shirt will be its own separate layer from the stuff that's behind it. So placing the robot head in, we can actually situate it with inside of our footage correctly that way. And since we already have a clean plate of everything in the background, all we have to focus on right now, I think this week, is going to be creating that 3D model of the robot head. Probably texture it today. I don't know. We'll see what we get to. And we're just going to find the Chappie head. This is what we're going to try 3D modeling here in Blender today. And, you know, this was created by Weta Digital. Those wonderful artists over there, those beautiful human beings. And we're going to try to do it ourselves here on our computer. So I figured we could probably use some nice surface imperfections of like the different paint chipping away and whatnot. This requires to create some layers of the texturing. And then my only concern also is that there's a good amount of wires and cables coming off the head. So we're going to want to have some kind of either soft body track or, you know, just rig it appropriately. So that way the wires don't fly all over the place and they're moving how wires would move. And then Chappie, the actual film, they had all these chains and stuff. I don't know if you guys know the story about how Chappie, the movie, was created, but they basically had a dude that just acted out the shots, and then every single shot, they keyframed it. They hand keyframed it, all the movements. So it's all just hand keyframe. They didn't use motion tracking. They didn't use any of that. That's as far as I know. That's our cube there. So if we grabbed, can we grab that? Yes. So we have our meshes and we have our cameras and we have this cube. So our meshes, our camera, and our cube. So I'm going to delete the meshes empty. So now we only have this other empty here. Looks like we still have 2 empties. Let's delete all these extra empties. We basically only want this one empty. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to take this for our own sake. And we're just going to, let's say object keep transform. We're just parenting it to this cube because we know this cube is the center of our scene that we have. So if we take this and then we say selection to cursor, then it'll move our entire environment to our world origin. And then now, because our scaling is all off, let's add in, how big is this head, do you think? What is that? What is that? What's this size? What is the height of a head? 18 to 20 centimeters. Okay. So I like to then add in a plane. This is just my favorite workflow is just adding in like a single vertice here. Whoops, let's delete that. And then Shift S and then do selection to cursor. So this goes to the center of our world here. If I extrude that on the Z axis, 0.2, that'll be 0.2 meters tall. That's how tall our head should be. So now, if we take this whole cube here and then we just scale it up, we basically want to scale it up. Let's put that on the bottom of our head location. And then this is the top of our head. We have this little line here. And then all I want to do is then scale this on the 3D cursor to the top. Now our head is roughly the correctest it's the correct size. All right, it's the correct size. So now we've got our head here and it's roughly the correct size. I'm going to delete this camera because we've got this extra camera here that we don't need, and then we've got this massive camera here. Can I change the size of this, the scale of it? I need some settings done here. So that's background image, viewport display. Can we change the viewport display of the size of it? There we go. Okay, so we have our cube. that we are going to not use, but we actually have it for our reference of the direction that everything will be. So I'm going to go over into our display settings here. I'm going to create a whole new collection. We're just going to call this reference. And this is where you can put layout things like this, if you're doing a building or some kind of like CG world that you're creating, but you have real world elements as well. I like to place all of that stuff in here. You can put it in a layout, you can put it in a reference, but I like to create a whole separate collection to keep everything organized. We're just going to take this object 0 that got imported from our nuke and we'll place it directly in here. We're going to disable the camera option on this collection. That way it's its own separate thing, keeps everything super clean later. All right, so with that being said, that gets placed inside of here, but inside of our viewport to make it very clear to us that this won't be rendering, we can also change the viewport display. So I'm going to go down here to viewport display, and then I'm going to display it as wireframe, and that's going to give us just this cube here. First, before we do this, I'm going to change this to solid, and then we just select everything on the inside of here. Let's just grab all of these inside squares. Beautiful. Again, selecting all the inside squares on face selection mode. Okay, so now we've got this. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. We actually don't even need to create the planes on it because it's not going to be rendering anyways. We're just mostly using it for scale. Okay, I'm going to delete this extra edge that we have here. This was used for the scale of our head, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And now we've got ourselves a lovely head. And of course, it moves just the way it did before because it's the camera moving. So all we have to do actually now is just go ahead and start adding in shapes. So if I add in, let's say, a sphere here, we unhide our camera so that way we can actually see. You'll notice that the sphere is moving appropriately with how the head is moving. This is the loveliness of doing it this workflow, is that all we then have to do is basically add in our objects to where the tracking is happening, and then everything will move accordingly with it. That's the best part about this. Okay, great. So we're not going to be using a sphere because that's not what we need. Instead, I'm going to, not delete everything. I'm going to also delete this light up here though. I'm going to select everything and then just hide it. And then we can go in and then we can start modeling our head to how we want it. Okay, I'm going to start out with doing this on its side because we've got these kind of cylinder-esque sides to the head here. So let's go ahead and just grab a circle, and then I'm going to, let's just create the rough shapes here first. I'm trying to fill these vertices in a clean way. I guess not. We can always just press F though on our keyboard, and that will fill it in that way. I thought you could just do bridge edge loops. Okay. The only concern I have now is the bevel functionality of this. So if we add, oh yeah, that works totally fine. I'm going to use the mirror functionality here, so that way we've got the other side of the head going on. Yeah, we'll do Y-axis. It's got like these, what do they call those? Like pie pans, basically. Like those old. Does anybody remember those old? Do they still sell those? Those old tinfoil pie pans. I haven't seen those since I was a kid. This is hard shape to get, I feel like. And we'll just do it this way. I'll just add in another cube here. See, we deleted the other cube because we didn't need their default cube. We don't want their default cube. We want to make our own cubes. Basically trying to create this top piece here, which we'll just scale this down. I'm going to subdivide this surface here, and then we'll just bring this to the edge here. That's going to give us some bevel opportunities. Probably go all the way down with that, and then we're going to create a flat front to this. I'm going to bring that in a little bit. Okay, for some reason this still feels a little big to me, so we're going to check that out. Let's bring that in, and let's edge loop this all the way inwards. I'm going to do one more in here, and then we're going to scale that in. Let's use a subdivide surface here, and I'm going to use that before the mirror. Let's bring that out a little bit. Maybe scale it in. I'm going to make kind of like this small center piece here on the front. Just going to bevel that front there. I guess we do want these to be sharp edges, don't we? Probably could have beveled that with just more, and that honestly would have been better. I'm going to bring this out now, and then we're just going to create this mouth, basically. Let's do object, set origin to 3D cursor. And then now if we use a mirror functionality here, I'm going to mirror it on the y-axis or the z-axis. Yeah, that probably is good. And then now we can just extrude that. We'll just fill this first. Beautiful. Okay, now this is where mirroring on would have been really nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to edge loop the center of this whole cube situation. And then if we go ahead and delete the vertices on the one side, I'm going to re-mirror everything. And again, just do that on the z-axis here. And then so now any changes we make to the one side will automatically be used over on the other side as well. Just grab all of these. We're just going to make everything go all the way to the top here. I'm going to duplicate this just on the z-axis, and then we'll just fill in that way. That way we have it go all the way to the front here. Just fill that in. Let's edge loop some more. No, edge loop that, edge loop this, and then just keep filling in some stuff. This edge right here, if we now just make this pretty slim here, make this pretty slim as well. If we just grab this single edge right there and then grab that on the z-axis downwards, we can create like that side piece. Nice. That's going to be the side of the goggles there. Because if we wanted to, we could actually go into some of these faces like this and then just bevel them outwards a little bit. That'll create a nice angle to your edge, because in real life there is no such thing as a sharp edge. So you can also select everything all the way around the goggles and then, you know, bevel that as well. That'll catch the light in these like very unique ways. I'm going to mirror this, and then here's the cool feature you could use. You just mirror it around something. So let's just do it around that object. We're going to want this guy here. We'll scale that down. Just do that. And then with this dude, let's just apply everything here. And then we're going to use a Boolean. I love Booleans. I got called out on a live stream a few months ago where I was using a Boolean to model, and everybody made fun of me. And I was like, you know what? You guys go ahead and do your little edge loopy thingy and like get all the way to it and model it. I don't care. I'm not a good modeler, and I never claimed to be. Now let's create this like front piece here. Do cursor to select it on this so it goes to the center of everything there. And then if we create a new plane, and then delete everything except for one vertice, and then add that vertice. Let's do selection to cursor. Booyah, baby. We're onto something. And then I'm going to grab this, move this out to there. Let's just extrude this now. We're just going to try to create, as much as possible, something like that. And then if we use a mirror modifier on top of it, to mirror on the y-axis. There we go. Again, going back to top view. I think then selecting this whole thing and then just grabbing it out on the X. We really want this to follow that line. And then all I'm going to do is just apply that. And then we'll just grab this and move this all the way back. But now I'm just going to take this and then we'll convert it. I'll do convert to a curve. Though maybe before, I don't know. Let's just see how this looks first. I'm going to go to the geometry and then we'll change the depth here. What about the resolution? I think that's where we're running into a problem is that I had too sharp of edges there. So basically want to make these Bezier curves. Is that possible? Probably have to go all the way back to just the vertices. And then if we then add in a subdivide surface, and we'll just smooth that bad boy out like so. And we'll just apply that and then convert this. That's probably going to be. If somebody knows another way of doing that, let me know. Just going to then add that in, and then now this resolution, and ooh, whoa, that's cool. It's not what I wanted to do. I want to shade this smooth. Okay, so that, we'll probably just change the scale of this now. Oh yeah, baby. That's basically what we were looking for. Okay, I'm gonna then do the same thing we just did, but now for the bottom. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm gonna grab this front here. And then we'll use the thing that Andrew, oh my gosh, Blender Guru said he wanted to get rid of, that I use all the time. Proportional editing? Who freaking doesn't use proportional editing? I'm going to grab this edge here now. And we'll just extrude it backwards, right? Is that what we want to do? We'll just extrude it backwards. They can't tell us to stop. Just grab this whole top side, deselect that, I guess. I don't know. And we'll just go up to about right there. And then somehow this needs to fuse with that. I think the scaling is a little off, probably. It's interesting. So there's like this drop-down portion here that's more of like a cylinder on the side piece than anything. It's like a jaw cylinder or something like that. Certainly getting better. We're getting closer. It's closer. Can we just admit, or can I just admit that I'm just lazy right now and I just don't want to fill in these vertices correctly? Is that okay for me to admit, or are you guys going to be angry if I admit that? There we go, dude. We've got this like weird-ass jaw thingy going on. That's pretty sweet. I like it. I like it. Let's add an empty in. Add a cube empty. Select our whole head that we've got going on. Then select the empty. Now, if we scale this guy down and then just place him here, I'm just curious what it looks like. So we're just going to scale everything down, place it on our robot head location. This is our 0.2 meter tall head that we've got going on. Of course, we're going to animate it and stuff, so we'll get to that. Okay, let's add in some wires. I like all these wires coming out the bottom here. I think that looks so cool. Dude, this can't be the same robot head. I don't think it is. I'm just going to go back in and add a cube. Cubes with a beveled edge. Yeah? I mean, it makes it so much easier just to like add a little bit of extra detail in that way. But I feel like I've always lived my life with being overconfident in my abilities and then halfway through a job freaking out because I realize that I'm in over my head. I don't know. Is anybody else like that? And it's gotten better over the years because now I kind of do know how to do most things. But, like, you know, it certainly almost got me in trouble a bunch of times. Let's make one ear first here. Let's see. They're wanting on the back of the head. That's fine. Probably put it right about there. Cover up that patch. Yeah, I've gotten a few jobs through Facebook posts that have worked out really well over the years. I've met people, you know, like on a golf course and then started working on a job with them that way. You know, now have friendships with people like that, you know. So you never know where you're going to get your next gig sometimes. Okay, that's good. I'm going to bevel this edge here. And then we'll shade schmoo that. That's nice. You know what I think probably might be the best way to do this? Let's do this by one side at a time. Is this how you make an ear? It's like bunny ears? Oh, that's nice. I like that. Just smooth that out a little bit. Booyah, baby. We've got an ear. Is that the ear we're going for? Okay, screw this. We're going to delete one of the faces. So now we just have a circle. And then because this is at an angle, this makes it a little difficult. But you can use... what's that called? What is that called? I'll need to deform this to shrink wrap onto that. Beautiful. Apply it. Go back over here. Select your faces. Extrude them outwards. Voila. You have yourself a little thingy-me-bob on the surface of your thing. Okay, that's looking pretty clean to me. I think we should add in some wires now, boys. I wish they had a single vertice that you can add in rather than doing it this way. But yeah, we'll just add this vertice here. We'll go to this view so that we could see it a little bit easier. We're just gonna extrude this downwards, and then now if we added a nice subdivision surface, we'll do a few of these, but for the most part, that's good. So we'll just say convert this to a curve. And then now this curve, we can go into our depth and just make it a little bit bigger. Shade smooth, please. Now, with this all centered up on that, we can go ahead and let's add in a circle probably for the below head portion of things. About that size will do. Yeah, let's extrude that downwards. Nice. And probably should continue some other mechanisms that are going to be below the head. That's only on one side though, so let's just take all of this. We want to convert them one by one. And I don't have any saves real quick, so let's do convert to mesh. Do this for all of them, and then we'll just join them together. Just make sure all of that goes in together, and then this whole thing, we're going to want to mirror it around our head again on the other side of the body. So that way we have the cables on all the sides kind of like getting tucked down into the neck area as it's going down. We're just going to do it through like a Bezier curve, probably the easiest. So go to curves, add a Bezier curve, and we'll go to side view here. Just grab the whole thing, and gosh, scale on the y-axis 0 first, just so that way everything is very smooth. And then we can just scale everything down now, and I'm just going to turn off proportional editing. But what this will allow us to do is go to the side view here, and I'm going to kind of line this up with our guy. And then you go all the way to the back here. I'm going to move it outwards. And then now if we add in that geometry that we had before, makes it a little bit easier to see. It's a little too big. That might be fine. And that goes along the top side there. I'll just convert that back to a mesh, and then we just mirror it the same way we did everything else. Now I think what we're going to want to add in is some of these like screw holes. And we can do that by just using like a Boolean essentially to cut stuff out. So let's do the same thing we did before. Probably do this by selecting this face here, setting that cursor to select it, adding in a cylinder, scaling that down, rotating it first. And then if we go to this side view here, let's actually hide this camera so we can see what we're doing. If we go to this side view here, we just set the scaling of this to be whatever we want it to. And we're just going to grab it and move it over to like roughly where we want these screws to be. And how far we want those indents to be as well. And then now, if we use a Boolean, actually we want to select this guy. And we're going to just use this Boolean here of this cylinder. Now if we hide this, you can kind of see what's going on. It just creates a hole in there. And we kind of want to make sure that it chops into it. So let's see. Before the mirror, after the subdivision, we'll do a union. And then that creates kind of like more of a hole, essentially, on the inside of that. You could also do a bevel functionality as well if you wanted to. Now we're just going to, instead of rotating on this medium point, let's rotate this on this 3D cursor here. And then we're just going to duplicate our cylinder that we have. And then rotate, I don't know, 25 degrees. No, 33 degrees, 45 degrees. And we like 45. Duplicate, rotate, 45. There you go. You got yourself some holes in the side of your head. And that's getting mirrored onto this other side as well. I'm going to take that now, and on our thing, let's just go ahead and apply this. Oh, we don't want to, well, we can. Let's apply the subdivision and then the Boolean. We'll keep the mirror for right now. Okay, great. Now, let's go ahead and go into our mesh. Oh my gosh, in this new version of Blender, we don't have bolts, do we? That sucks. Oh, there we go. They do have it. Scale it up, rotate it, 90 degrees. Awesome. Boom. And actually, let's do this again. Let's go into mesh, bolt. Let's go look at this guy. And then we'll change our bolt settings here. There you go. So there's your bolts now on the 3D model there. With that being said, though, let's go add some more bolts in. What's the name of our tech company, guys? C Labs. Let's convert this to a mesh, and then we take this guy, Booleanize the text, and then we do this, union. It's pretty close. I just don't like how much it's embedding into it. Maybe we bevel it outwards. So instead, you take this guy, you do that number on it, and that way it's like actually popping out. Let's take this, well, then just join it. Boom. Now it appears on both sides, although it's mirrored. It's a printing malfunction. It's mirrored on the other side. No, we won't do that. Can't mirror things on text? That's lame. Okay, let's Alt-H everything. I'm going to go into here. I'm just going to apply subdivision and booleans. And then now I can go ahead and delete that guy. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this. We'll apply booleans, delete that, apply the booleans, delete that, booleans, just like slowly cleaning everything up here. So booleans, we'll apply the mirror, then the booleans. So that way I could just delete that. And we'll take all of that, join it together. That way we're not getting the glitchiness anymore on that front of that face. And now this model is a lot closer to being ready for actual texturing work. We still have all of these things to select. So if we go into here and then we just select everything. And then once we have everything selected, let's go back to our empty that we had. We're going to Alt H. That's fine. Oh, we got to enable our collection here. Let's see. We're going to go to everything else. Select all of that. Go back. Shift select this guy, which is currently kind of moving everything around. Then we'll do Object Keep Transform. Now, let's see. You're supposed to be parented to this guy. Object Keep Transform. Let's make sure we're setting our keyframe. Probably have to actually rig these wires though, so that way we can actually have some more rigging functionality for like how the wires are moving. Really basic animation that I'm doing here with the head. It's honestly not that much. So I'm going to say cursor to selected. We're just going to put our cursor to selection of our robot head here. And let's turn our head off. Turn our head off? Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to just add in a UV sphere. This is another thing that you could theoretically do in order to try to match stuff a little better inside of CG. And obviously, we're going to need to add a new material. So I'm just going to add in a nice little material here. We'll just call this chrome, make it completely metallic with 0 roughness. And I'm going to set the to full white. And so that way we should be able to get a nice reflection of everything that's inside of our environment. And one thing you'll notice immediately is that we don't have any reflections. It's because inside of our CG world, there is nothing for it to reflect. And this is where things kind of get interesting. It's not that we want to actually replace any of the background here, but the background does need to be reflected onto our CG surface. So there's a couple ways we could do this. And then over inside of our window over here, I'll show you a couple different things. Let's go to our world settings. We have our base world here, and I'm going to, first of which, inside of here, click on your color. And obviously, if we change this color to anything, you'll notice that the reflection of our chrome ball changes as well. And that's as expected, because essentially what it's doing is it's changing the overall solid color of the world that you have around it. We can actually load in images inside of this by going and clicking on environmental texture. Now, normally you would want to load in an HDRI, but since we don't have a 360 image of this, we're going to have to kind of make our own. And there's a couple ways that we can actually do that. If we go to our VFX, and let's see, it's been a minute since I've been here, but if we just go to our plate and load in our first frame, let's go ahead and do that. You'll notice that we actually have our actor here, but we also have everything else. So we have like the rest of the environment that's kind of like coming in and reflecting on this chrome ball. Now, this is super cool because we didn't really have to do anything at this point, but now we already have reflections. We have the reflections of our real environment. The only thing is we actually have the reflections kind of incorrect. It's reflecting our guy that's standing here when the sphere is technically over the area in which this guy should be existing. So this is where things get a little tricky. Because we don't exactly have the camera position of where that is actually taking place. We now have our actor here, but we don't want our actor here. So this is where we're going to open up like a compositing software. You can use Nuke, which is what I'll be using. If you guys want to use Nuke, feel free to grab it. There's a free version of Nuke called Nuke Non-Commercial. Definitely recommend learning how to use Nuke. Otherwise, you could use After Effects, use whatever other software you want. Similar prospects of what we're doing there. What is to this date? 210105. All these project files, of course, as I said, were located up on our Patreon. But I'm going to open up the previous project file that I already have for this. And what we really kind of need to do at this point, so last time we created just the foreground of where our actor was. This time we kind of need to make the everything behind him, which is the clean plate version. We already have the clean plate version, but I want to make sure to not save this as like a Rec 709. I want to save it as an EXR. And I'm going to put the frame number down and use EXR. We're going to render this out as scene linear, and we'll render it out as frame 1000. And then we're going to load in, under materials, our HDRI V1. And this works a little better. Now, there is some weird things. Now, our reflections that we have, yes, we've got our bottles on the reflection, which are our bottles right here. But one thing interesting is our dude is the thing that should be reflecting here, not these bottles. And unfortunately, we don't exactly have, like, I think another reference. Actually, if they have another angle of the guy that's drinking, I'm thinking that we can piece everything together in After Effects. But let's figure this out first. Okay, so I think we don't really have him from the other perspective, like a front angle perspective. It would be cool if we did, but we don't. So instead, we're going to use this. Let's open up DaVinci Resolve. I have to make a new plate of this. I don't think I have a plate of this already. I'm going to render out this clip. Let's render this clip here. This is going to our plates folder, and I'm going to call this VFX 10. And then we're going to call this, I think we should call this FG1. And I'm going to load in our plate. We've got this guy, and we currently have our clean plate already. And we somehow have to piece these together. They're very different camera angles. But that's not going to be impossible, all right? I promise you, it will not be impossible. Let's go ahead and save. Let's see, where do I have my previous? There it is. It's a digital matte painting photo. Let's do the same thing over here. I'm just going to call this FG1. Let's make that 1 there. And then let's go ahead and render this out in the same place. I'm going to make it 16-bit rather. And that first frame should be good. Now we're going to open up a whole nother software. I'm going to open up Photoshop. And we're going to piece everything together to create ourselves a 360 photo from the reference images that we have. So I'm going to open up our VFX materials. Let's see, we've got our digital matte painting, screenshots. I'm going to open up our actual DMP that we already created. And then, so I'm going to say image, and then we'll do canvas size, 8196 by 4096. And that gives ourselves a full image. Yes, I know Photoshop. I need to upgrade my my beta version. I always don't like to update my beta version because things break, and I don't like it when things break. Okay, so this is going to be a piece of our HDRI. I would say probably about this large here. Okay, we'll just go ahead and save that and place that. And then I'm going to go back into our, and then we've got this dude here. So I'm going to import that over into our Photoshop. Line this up with this roughly, right? Here's what I'm going to do. We select now this part of the image like so. And then we're going to do select invert. So that's going to make everything else. Okay. We're going to deselect everything. Generative. And then we say 360 photo. Let's see how well this works. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to merge these together first. Let's merge the layers. And then we're going to just select everything. This is great that it's not working on stream, though it's worked for me 1,000 times before. Okay, great. Let's do that. I'm going to merge everything. And then we're going to do image adjustments. Offset that thing, guys. And then let's do it again. Well, I will say this is pretty close to what we want. It's not quite perfect. But it's pretty close. It's pretty close. It's pretty close. So we'll take this now, and we're going to export this now. Export it as a PNG. And I'm going to save this into our folder here. We have it as a matte 709, kind of like color space. What we essentially want to do is take this back into Nuke, import it, and now, yeah, I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference. But we want to then render this out again, okay? So I'm just going to copy paste our right node. We're going to call this V2. And then if we go back into our Blender now, we'll do load in our new HDRI. Now, the reflection angle is a little off because our dude is kind of like in a different position. But we can do a few things to maybe get this to work. Maybe this is not this guy. Maybe it's a different guy. I don't know. We're going to play with this a second. So we're going to go into here, and then I'm going to open up the shader editor. Go to our world options. And here's our HDRI that's currently inside of our image. And we're going to tag this as ACES CG because right now it's tagged as the wrong color space. So let's scroll down here to ACES CG, which is the color space that we are working in. So now everything from the color perspective is going to line up a little better. And then I'm going to add in some mapping coordinate nodes here. And let's rotate our entire environment. Let's go back over to our object settings now. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate our sphere here. And this other sphere, we'll give it a different material. We'll call this just gray. Remove all metallic. Make it fully rough. And you can see now that the lighting is working a lot better. I think we still want a little bit more of a harsh light. And this is where, because it's not a full HDRI, we can't duplicate everything exactly using that method that we already did. But now we can go in with a better reflections and we could make things a little bit nicer. So I'm going to add in some area lights here now. So let's go ahead and add in a nice area light here. Let's grab that back here. Just place this over here now. On this area light, let's go to our object settings. You'll notice that we're seeing like a little square now appear with inside of our scene. We don't want that. We want to actually make it so that we're having light, but it's not being created in kind of like a physical space, if you will. So let's actually take these balls here and swap them because we're really more interested now in this like gray ball here to kind of match the lighting in which we're doing. I'm going to select our area light, and to fix all glossy issues, scroll down to shading with inside of your properties panel on this thing. Start light, and then our object panel should be, visibility, sorry, and then uncheck glossy. This won't make it so that it doesn't shine light on your diffuse objects, but it will make it so that you don't see it with inside of your glossiness of your objects. And now we can increase the intensity of this, just kind of match this up a little bit, probably a little more side angle, just to match the rest of the lighting here on how we have the lighting on the side of our shirt. Let's open up DaVinci Resolve again because I didn't render out the correct section of it. But we'll line up our plate so everything lines up exactly with the guy's hand up and then coming down at the same time. So this shot now, we're going to go over into our delivery tab and we'll just do the exact same thing as we did before. Go back into our reflection that we have here. Just going to take everything and load in our new plate that we have. Do I have any filmmakers that I take? You know what? Gareth Edwards is actually a really great answer because I just think that, you know, him as a director, he is a great director, but he's also comes from the world of visual effects, and I think I aspire to kind of like be like that, you know? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's like any one person that just like, I'm like, oh, I want to be that person. I think I take away from a lot of different types of filmmakers. Okay, that's tracked though. Okay, so what I was doing as I was talking there for a second was I was tracking the shot, and then we're going to stabilize it. And then from that stabilized shot, now we have a version of the shot that's stabilized to a certain extent. It's not really stabilized. Maybe it should be a little more stabilized. Yeah, we'll stabilize it a little more. So we'll add another tracker in. Let's track something on the same plane. Probably this guy right here. All right, now that that is done, I'm actually going to, let's add a merge node in here. And also, by the way, this footage was never actually raw, so it's not exactly like it matters. You know, you're kind of right, but at the same time, it doesn't ever actually matter. Not in this particular instance. Like, I just did this project, and I always like to work with EXRs just because that's my workflow. I love working in linear. Then, you know, it just makes everything cleaner if you always have everything using the exact same pipeline. And I just did this job where, you know, everything was like different types of log. Let's do auto alpha for all of this. That way these things will actually merge on top of each other. And then let's play this back. Okay, this is looking pretty good, but his hands are kind of just sitting there. If we go in and we add in a paint node, I'm going to do a frame hold after the fact. I'm going to get rid of some of the stuff here. For instance, his jacket and stuff. Just going to do some fancy paint outs, guys. Okay, this is going to kind of work. I think this totally works. Now, we're going to take this HDRI. I'm going to call this version 3 inside of the folder. I'm going to put this inside of, like, completely name it V3. We're going to save this as scene linear, create directory, render it, global, just to 54. And we're going to hit the render button. Okay, now that this is rendered, we can go over to our world settings. And inside of the world settings, we're going to, again, remove our world that we currently have. And let's see if this works. I don't know. We're going to see if it works. I've actually never imported an image sequence, so that's why I'm really hoping this does work. All right, HDRI V3. I'm going to put this in frame 1000. Select all the way to the bottom. Open the image. Yo, you can do image sequence. That's cool. And then we'll open up ACES CG here. So far not working. Auto refresh. There we go. This is now working. So our EXR sequence that we have now is animated to have the reflections inside of the shot move with him when he's drinking and placing his cup down. That's actually super cool because now when we actually texture our robot character, that the reflections of everything is going to be moving with how the actual shot is moving on top of it. I want this light to be a little more intense just to match the intensity here. Let's do a few other things. Let's add in another area light, something like that. Let's go to our, rotate this around our 3D cursor. And then I'm going to just get ourselves a little bit more of a backlight from this angle here. We have like this kind of like, I guess this is more so in front of it. We're going to do a few of these. I'm going to make this a little bit more yellowy. I'm just really trying to get that kind of like orangish yellow light on the top of the surface there. So I'm just going to duplicate that. And then we're going to rotate that around. And then this is just going to give us a little bit more of this headlight. And then now let's go back over into our head here, re-enable it. And you can tell right off the bat, the lighting of just the grayscale of the robot head already feels like it fits with inside of the environment without us really having to do anything. Like this is without any texturing. This is without anything. This is just a grayscale head because we spent so much time making sure those spheres fit with inside of our world. Now we can go in and actually do proper texturing on this guy, and everything we add on top of this is just going to add in even more detail to our robot head. I want the image as planes option. Do mesh plane. I don't know if mesh plane is the correct thing anymore. I don't know anymore, guys. Basically want to import our front collar, which would be our material, and then let's load in our front collar frame 1000. Select our camera here. We're going to turn off our actual front collar image that we're importing, our FG material here. I'm going to turn that off for a second because hopefully this will be it. So I'm going to just set that up here, and that loaded in our texture, but it's not using the correct coordinates in which we want. We want it to be using the coordinates from the camera's position. Okay. So let's go to our camera view now. Put this, roughly in the right place. Go to camera view here, and we're just going to do project from view. Now we have our collar here, but it's super dark, and that's because it's relighting it. So if we just plug the color directly into the surface here, you'll notice that that's actually correct. So we'll do a mix color node. It's actually a mix shader, I feel like. Plug that one in, and from the alpha here for the factor, we're going to want a transparent BSDF that's going to plug into this top value. And now again, this is ACES CG because I want to push this back if possible. Kind of want full control over this if I can. Let's have this go out, covering just like certain sections of it. I think we're gonna need to make sure that this is cyclic. Oh, whoops. It's not an image sequence. That's a problem. Let's load this whole thing again. Open that image sequence. Okay. We got ourselves a robot head, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna add in a new material here. We're just gonna call this blue paint. And let's find ourselves, let's go to HDRI, Haven. Find ourselves a texture of some blue chip paint. That might be work pretty good for us. Plaster, concrete, fat, metal, rock, roofing, rocks. Let's do metal. We're gonna start with the side piece here. So we're gonna call this blue paint. Select this blue paint. Those will be like pipes or something like that. I don't know. Okay, we're gonna plug this into our roughness now. Let's first see what it looks like. Okay. If we add in, instead of objects, we're going to use objects instead of UV generated. I think no matter what, we're going to have a problem with this side piece here. Yeah, let's use UV. I think that's fine because we will adjust. And then I'm going to use a value node here, plug that into our value. And let's do, what? Unwrap? Yeah. This is my first time in this Blender, like really, like this is the first like project we're going all the way through on. And so I'm like, they changed the buttons, man. And then we're going to use this as our general UV setting. So we're going to plug everything else into this as we're going. Okay, with this normals, we're going to do normal maps. We're going to plug this into our normal map. I'm going to now take this over into our displacement that we have. Okay. And this should give us that. Then I'm going to do probably a bump is a good idea. And then we just plug this into our height of our bump. Cool. That gets placed into our displacement of our character. And now that's looking a lot better. We've got like this nice grungy metal reflections that we're getting off on the side here. So maybe we take this. I'm going to use an invert node. Okay, we're going to take our rusty metal that we have here. We're going to plug that into the color value of our invert color. And we're going to plug that into our metal. And then that should give us more of a metal surface for our character here. Now, you'll notice that actual Chappie doesn't have all that much metalness to him. He's actually pretty diffused. He's not super metallic. So if we take in a color ramp node now, plug this back over here into our metal roughness. Let's see. It actually probably would just be straight metallic. And then this is probably how reflective everything is supposed to be. Let's save this image as, put this under our regular image. Let's do image mesh. Let's go select our blue now. What blue do we like? We like this one. Just like this is the lightest version of that like DSAT blue kind of value that we got going on. He's going to look different inside of this environment. So we want this. Let's take this white value here and then let's make him not so rough. Like he's going to have a little bit of like reflection to him, to his character. It's a little dark, but it's also because it's the scene. But like, do we want it to be brighter? I don't know. I mean, we can add in like a nice area light on the front just to add a little bit of a diffuse to it. Oops. Let's rotate that around the median point, I'm thinking. So this will be blue paint as well. So like, I mean, let's do that. We're saving our work as we're going, by the way. That's a new concept I came up with. Let's see. I'm going to add in the blue paint to this. And then we're going to do a digital screen on the front of this. Let's open up Adobe After Effects. We're going to animate this inside of After Effects. It's probably the easiest way to do this. You could probably do it in any software, including Nuke. I prefer the tools inside of After Effects for this specific thing. Let's create a new comp and do 1920 by 1080. What we're going to do is we're going to create a black and white image that's basically going to light up the little eyeballs on our character. So with that being said, we're going to need a black background. It's just a black and white JPEG sequence. That's all we're creating right now. And inside of that black and white JPEG sequence, we're going to have little squares for the eyes. Our character has essentially 1, 2, 3, 4 by 1, 2, 3, or is it 1, 2, 3 and 1 by 3? 3 by 3, right? 3 by 3. Is that what we got going on here? So we'll do 3 by 3 with little squares. Let's take these guys, pre-comp them, move them up, and 50. Duplicate them, move them up, 100. So basically, they're all exactly 50 away from each other. I'm going to create a new null object that all of these white solids are now going to be attached to. And then this null object, we're just going to move them over. Move them over, baby. Just going to duplicate this and move everything to the top here. And then we're going to select all of our white solids here and connect them to our additional null. So this will be right eye, left eye. Oh my god, does shift not select? Then we're just gonna move this over. Okay, great. So our image sequence that we're going to have is going to be from 1000 to 1054. So open up your comp settings, and then we're gonna change this to 55 frames long, starting at frame 1000. That should make it so that the last frame in the sequence is 1054. Beautiful. So now we've got our little eyes there, and we're just going to create ourselves a texture mat of the eyes. That's it. New null object that both these guys are going to be attached to, and then I'm just going to scale this up. Just makes it really easy for me to grab it and move it around. A little hard to see without seeing it, so what we're going to do now is we'll just rename our comp here. Call this eyes v1. And then let's go ahead and render this out as an image sequence. I'm going to render it out as, well, do I already have a preset for this? Hopefully do. See, I got TIFF sequences. I've got a JPEG sequence. Beautiful. Okay, we're going to just render this out to our folder. I'm going to load in our eyes now. Do auto refresh. Set that to frame that. We're going to just do project from view. I'm going to swap this over to, where's my UV? There it is, UV editor. Okay, I'm going to grab this bottom here. Let's scale this Y 0. And let's do the same for this top, scale Y 0. We're just going to have to try to center this as much as possible. Let's look at a wave texture. What do we got here? Okay, that's pretty cool. So then that'll give us like a horizontal grid line effect. I'm going to duplicate this whole thing. Let's go back down here to the vector, same exact scale reference, but change it from X to Y. And so that's going to give us horizontal lines. I'm going to take both of these things, and then we're going to mix these together. So we'll do a mix color effect. That plus that. The factor completely set to full, and then we'll do screen. Let's take all of this. Let's do a color ramp. Let's take both these and then just add them together. But let's make it more subtle. So we'll just do another color ramp after all of that. I just want to make this a little more subtle. We actually might want to change the overall scale of everything, but we can do that actually just in a general sense. Right now the value is set to 1 for the scale, but we can actually change the scale overall here to like a 0.1 or like a 0.3, and then we can just make our scaling adjustments. Okay, we're going to do a couple things here. Let's use a mix shader. I think this is going to give us a little bit more control. We have our digital screen that's just going to be this base metallic kind of texture. I might even make the roughness a little bit less. That way it can see the surrounding environment a little better. Might also make this a little bit brighter like so. It's just going to give off that kind of like screen-like effect. And we'll plug that into our shader effect. And then let's also create an emission shader. And this emission shader is going to be the blue that we already created. So let's, I already deleted it. That's fine. Basically just need a blue emission. Could be a little brighter. And then using this, we're going to mix that into our FAC. And now, depending on how bright this is, should be that effect coming through. Which it's not, because I didn't plug it into our shader. There we go. Again, it's just the idea that it is a screen that has pixels and it's emitting light. Because on top of all of that, now we have our actual image sequence here that we can then mix over top of it. This right here is our texture that we created. You could just say Control J, and that's just going to create a background for that dude. And then let's take this guy right here. This is our separate image sequence that we just imported from After Effects. And then we want to mix both of these together. So we're going to do another mix color now. And then this mix color is going to be taking this value here and plugging that directly into our factor. And you'll notice that now we get our little dots in here. And we really kind of want our dots to line up with the rest of everything else. So this is where we can go in and adjust our scaling settings for everything. So I'm actually going to duplicate our work here when we go to this texture. Oh, that looks pretty sweet. Although we want it a little more dented because he's got like this dented thing going on. I don't know, man. But what we can use this for is shading. So let's do that. Let's use a color ramp also. And make the white values not exactly white. Let's just make them a lot darker. That's cool. And then let's use... Well, first we could probably plug this directly into our roughness. You can duplicate the cube and use the good old wireframe modeler to get a mesh look with the displacement. Oh, that's actually pretty cool. Wouldn't that be like, let's duplicate this, and then you use the wireframe and it just converts, which is cool. Use like multi-resolution, and then we just subdivide it more, and then you'll just get more. I guess that's actually good enough. Increase the subdivision. Oh, yeah. Rather than creating my own thing, let's go to our settings down here. I'm going to duplicate the material and call this mouth. Whoops, I'm on caps lock, but it doesn't matter. Remove the base color on that. Let's do a couple of the others, these other ones. So let's go to blue paint on this. We're going to duplicate it and call this black paint. And inside of our black paint settings here, all we have to do is just remove the saturation. And then now we're just going to make this a little bit darker. And we'll just now select black paint on all this. And since it's procedural, we really just don't have to do all that much work. It's just adding basic materials on. Although chrome, honestly, almost would be kind of cool. Since I already do have that chrome material, I'm just going to duplicate it and call it dirty, chrome dirty. Let's do chrome dirty and then import in our roughness and just plug that over here. And then this is going to use objects. Let's swap these to chrome dirty as well. I love doing robots because they really don't require all that many different materials. Everything is just so dark. I'm not exactly a fan of the blue. Let's see, let's do this. Let's go to duplicate this. And then let's make this light a little brighter. Okay. Just fine-tuning some of the lighting here to get everything to line up a little better. I would say we probably want to make sure all the modifiers are applied. Let's just apply that modifier. And we're going to join a lot of these big pieces together. It adds flour, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we're going to create a new material here. I'm going to 2048 by 1080. And it should be good. Black. New image. Let's just go ahead and view this. This is going to be our matte material for our spray paint. And just so that I can see this, I mean, you guys can pull up the image if you want. What did I call this? Oh, I just called it 2048. What the heck? New image. We're going to call this dirty. Dirt head. I'm going to open up 1K textures. Let's look for some dirt here, guys. Let's do a little plug. You guys can get all these surface imperfections over on the Patreon. Make sure to join the Patreon below. Link is in the description. Okay, now I imported that. Let's make sure that we're using not the texture. We're going to remove the texture, but we are going to use this as a texture mask. So make sure that's selected and unselected on texture. Always auto adds it to texture mask or as the texture, but not on the mask. So just make sure you're doing that. Also random rake. Make sure both those are selected. And then now we're just going to start adding in some dirt. And then we'll do the spray paint of like the dollar sign and stuff like that in a minute. But for right now, let's go ahead and just save this. And I'll do image, save. Let's adjust some of the shaders that we're using here for that. So this is our regular principled BSDF. And then now we have these matte paint textures. So I'm going to use a mix shader node and plug this directly into our FAC. And this will go to the top of that. Now, below everything else, I'm just going to move all of this over so we have a little bit more room. Below everything else, we're going to want to have a whole different principled BSDF setup. So create a new principled BSDF. And then this one, we're going to oil her up, baby. I'm going to make actually the roughness 0, so that way it's super reflective. And let's see, that with maybe like a little yigginess, you know. So we've got that's roughly our texture that we're going for there. Plug that into the bottom shader, and then now we should be able to see some of that grime coming through. And if you want to make it even more visible, we can add in a color ramp before this FAC, and then we could just really do that. And then now I'm actually going to add in a noise texture, and then we're going to just change the scale of this to be a lot larger. Do a mix color, I think. I'll plug this into the factor. I think this, whoops. I want actually this probably to go down here. So let's just move everything down. And then I'm going to make this A, probably that. And the B is just going to be a lighter version of it. That's just going to give some textural effect to everything. I'm going to make the detail a lot higher too. And then, let's see. Adjust the roughness, lunicity, change the scaling to this to be something like that. That's very kind of like a little bit more dirty. And then I'm going to use a RGB curves just to make this a little darker. Then on this white value up here, I might even make it so it's never like fully visible. Let's do a mix color, and I'm going to take the roughness that we have that's creating kind of like most of this principled BSDF effect that we have going on. I think this rusty metal, it's going into the metallic. But yeah, if we plug that into the A, let's just go view this real quick. Let's keep the factor of this at 0. This is kind of like our overall of that. And that invert, let's see, I think that looks pretty good. Let's use this with a color ramp. Just make the blacks a little bit more crunchy. And this is kind of like the metal surface of everything. And then this is our mixed color. And this is just all of the brown before it goes in. The problem is that this brown is super flat and it doesn't reflect the fact that it's sitting on top of a metallic surface that should be curved at all. So if we take the color of this and plug that into the B, and then into the A, we take this normals that we just created of the kind of like this normals turned into a black and white bump map type thing. And then if we set the factor to 1, changing the mix here to a multiply, that should make it so this brown has like kind of like more of this like metallic movement to it. And obviously, you know, the more we add there to that effect, just give it the difference between this flat brown that we have and then with the multiply creates all of these kind of like curves of all of the normals that you're getting from the other texture, but now on this dirt texture that we're basically generating. And then from this, we plug that directly into our base color for this principled BSDF, and that gets plugged into our mix shader. So now our dirt is going to have like this extra detail associated with it that we didn't otherwise have before. I'm going to take all of that, and then let's just do unwrap this, smart UV unwrap it. That's going to handle most of the dirt that we're doing. I think now we're going to have to do some scuff marks on this black paint stuff. So I think that's the next step before we do like the overall spray paint. These need to be converted. So we'll do object, convert to mesh. Same thing with this one. Object, convert to mesh. Saving as I go. Selecting both these guys because both these are going to be one. I'm trying to think. I'm really trying to paint, might add these together and then do those in one go, but then do the rest of the body in a different go. It's probably the best way to go about this. So we'll add in a new image texture here. I'm going to say new, we'll call this paint matte, new image. Let's go ahead and view that new image. Let's save it. And of course, we will be using the regular texture coordinates for this matte that we are using. But if we go over into our texture paint settings, we're going to want to paint on, I guess, like a dollar sign, right? Like, do we want it on this side? Whoopsies. Do we want it on this side, or do we want it on the other side of the head? I think in the film it's on this side. Let's go to our layout settings now. We're going to select this dude, and we're going to join him in. Let's select both these guys. We're going to join it all together. Okay, now I think we have to kind of like add some of our own dirt around that, basically, which is just, ooh, whoopsies. Sorry, not a texture. We don't want a texture. We want it to be a texture mask. Fade the edges almost, if you will. Okay, guys, we've got now our texture in here. And I'm going to do another principled BSDF. And this one, I would say the roughness is going to be probably there. I don't know, make it a little more metallic, I guess. And then really we want that same dirt grime that we got a little bit earlier through this multiply node. I would say take the A plus this value here into the B, and if we go view that, you'll see kind of like that dirty whatever. Probably gonna, let's duplicate this guy and plug that into the factor here. Maybe go for a little less of that. Just customize it a little bit, put that into the B. Now if we view that, that's going to be our kind of underlying paint. It's going to be over top of the bumps of the normals, as you can see. And we'll plug that directly into our base texture. So if we go view that now, that's going to be what our spray paint over top of the metal will look like. Okay, perfect. We're going to want this before this mix shader. So another mix shader. This gets plugged into the bottom here. This paint matte gets plugged into the FAC. And so now if we go view that, should be just the metal with our paint. What does this look like? Let's use color ramp associated with this ambient occlusion. Okay, yeah, let's use this with a good old mix shader. This is going to get plugged into the FAC. And then let's just make this darker. Same roughness, same normals, it's just darker. And then this gets plugged into the white values. This gets plugged into the dark values. Might want to invert this, honestly. Yeah, there we go. Let's see. I also think that, like, let's add in a noise texture, another noise texture. And let's just view this real quick. Change the scale of this to a lot smaller. I'm gonna make the detail higher. Set that to like a 4D, I think. And then now, let's do a mix color associated with this. I'm gonna do let's do a screen. And then this FAC gets plugged into the B of that. And that should give us these kind of like different like texturing that's going on throughout this. This just needs a little bit of dirt and grime on it as well. So let's go ahead and add in another image texture. And this time we're going to say new. And we will call this iDirt. And go into our texture paint node. And with that selected, we can just make this a little uneven. But for the most part, I'm trying to get these like corners. Back over to our layout here. And now I'm going to copy our overall dirty dirt, okay? So we're going to grab this whole chunk of things, which really actually is just this chunk of things that we need, plus this, with that, and then that goes into that, that goes into that. which goes into that. So copy that, go into here, and then now we're just going to paste this. And this guy will then have another mix shader on it. And I'm going to probably just plug this into the top value here. And then this gets plugged into the bottom value. And then this is our iDirt that we're going to use as our FAC. So all I have to do is then just visualize that. And already, guys, we've got some nice little dirt grime that's happening on this thing. So all I have to do is add in another color ramp, and we can adjust it a little bit. Make it a little more visible, I think. I would say probably we want to copy this. Let's save that. Go into our eyes. And this is where we'll paste this into here. And over top of our mix shader, we'll just add another mix shader. And then this is going to have, you know, the same grime that we already have. So let's just go back into here, copy paste this whole setup. This is going to be our grime. So if I just select everything, we'll Control C and go back into our eyes. And I'll just paste that down here. Now this grime, we're just going to plug directly into the bottom of that. And now we just want to make this a little bit more visible, right? Again, probably have to get our dirt set up here. So we'll go ahead and select our dirt. And then we'll select this whole normals thing with that, and then the actual principled BSDF for it, as well as the mix shader. Go back over here, and then this is our paint setup. So we'll just go ahead and do that, and then plug this all the way in up here. So that goes to there, and then that goes to there. We'll create a new image texture, which gets plugged into the FAC, and then this one's going to be called Orange Dirt. New image. Let's go view it. Save it. And now we're going to go back to our texture paint. And let's see. Let's make things a little easier. On our blue, we're going to make sure that we're viewing the dirt that we created. So that way it can roughly match the dirt on both stuff. So under texture paint, we should be editing not that, but orange dirt. I'm going to select our effect here, and really it's just go through and add in a little bit of dirt pretty much everywhere. Let's go to area light. We're just going to keep adjusting some of this, I think. Let's make that quite a bit brighter from that angle there. I'm going to just make sure that this goes with the camera. You know what? We need some paint on this black bar. That's what's missing here. I almost missed it. Same thing as before with the white paint. Alright, so we're going to select our principled BSDF thing. I'm going to select this guy. Looks good. Mix shader. Let's go to our black bar now and paste this down here. And we're going to plug this material output in to the top of this shader. And this will be what we're going to be using. But I'm going to create a new image texture for this. New. And we'll call this black bar paint. Plug that into the FAC. And then we're going to view this guy. Control Z everything there. I'm going to select this all and just make sure that we're UV unwrapping it all together. Just kind of paint over all of it. I'm going to have to render this out, guys. And then from there, we'll be able to composite it. But for now, I think this concludes doing the shading and lighting inside of our stuff. I wanted to give you some of the settings that I used to render this stuff because I didn't show you guys this stuff last week, so I'm going to run through it real quick. A key thing to keep in mind that I noticed yesterday when I pulled it into Nuke and I was just like, oh, how does everything look just lining up? I didn't change the resolution settings here. So this is 1920 by 1080, which probably means that there's a cropping issue with the side of the plate. And you can see that probably that it's cropping the left and the right side because it's cropping the height to be height to height. That didn't cause a problem for us because his face never goes off to the side. But that is something to note that I didn't actually do that. So we're going to have to fix that over in the comp, but that's not that big of an issue. Not in our particular instance, though I will say, keep that in mind before you hit the render. These resolution settings need to match your aspect ratio, at least the aspect ratio of your final render. and that should have been 2048 by 1080. And then if you did want to render it out at half res, you just change this percentage here. That would be the way that I would definitely recommend doing that. So I'm going to set that back to 1920 by 1080, which is the incorrect aspect ratio. And then we use OpenEXR multi-layers. Now, why do we do that? Because it gives us a bunch of extra AOVs that we can render inside of our EXRs. I'm going to show you that in a second. So we use OpenEXR multi-layer. I tend to not overwrite, and I don't like to use placeholders unless I'm doing a render farm. More on that in another video. I set my color management settings, which you guys can't see too well because my head's in the way. I set that to ACES CG, so that way I'm using the exact same color management config file over inside of Nuke. So I'm using an ACES CG pipeline, and that's all the way from the very beginning when I made my visual effects plates. In DaVinci Resolve, I rendered out the plates as ACES CG. I then brought them into Nuke. They're tagged as ACES CG. Everything I render out of Blender is ACES CG. So that way everything is working together in this wonderful, beautiful pipeline that we have going on here. Okay, so that's your color management settings. Now let's go over here. This is our layers, all right? When we go into our layers, there's a bunch of AOVs that we can turn on. I did not turn these on, though I do recommend turning on normals in a general sense in a production pipeline. I love to turn on normals because it allows me to relight stuff inside of comp. But the other more important thing that I did turn on specifically for this render were crypto mats. Definitely recommend turning these on. I would at least turn on object, maybe material, depending on how your guys' meshes are set up. Let's see. So this is everything down to this portion here with the paint out. And we're going to need to stick our robot head in there. But we have separate layers, of course, right? We've got the front of the bow tie here. And then just before that, we actually have the non-bow tie section. Okay, so let's pull this in. I'm gonna open up a new read node, and we're gonna find our EXRs for this. I did render this, and I'll just show you here, to a folder called 3D out, and inside of that, version 1. This is how I like to keep things organized. You have just an output folder for all of your Blender EXRs that you're outputting, and then different version numbers inside of that for that. And usually I don't call this just 3D out. Maybe I'll call it, I'll put it under 3D out, and then I'll say robot head, and then version 1. And that way, if you have multiple CG elements that you are rendering out different layers of stuff, you could have robot head, you could have robot arms, you could have background, you could have whatever you want. That keeps everything super organized there. So I'm going to go and put version 1 in there, and then we'll go ahead and select our robot head, hit open. Now, if I go view this, the first thing that you're going to notice is that it's all just black, but if we go to our layers here, you can see that we have a bunch of layers associated with this robot head EXRs that we just inputted, but nothing's under RGBA. And this just happens to be the way that Blender is currently rendering out the stuff. It doesn't render your RGBA channel to RGBA. It renders it to a combined RGBA. So we're going to need to shuffle that over into our main RGBA section. So if we add a shuffle node in, you'll notice that we can also see all of our layers here. And I'm just going to select view layer combined, which is just the render beauty pass of our view layer. And that's going to put everything from there, the red, green, blue, alpha, directly over into our main RGBA. So now we have all of our channels associated with that. Just going to render everything out over alpha. Cool, that looks great. Now we're going to want to comp this over top of our head. Now there's a couple ways we could do this. First of all, one thing to realize is that we need to drop this in at about this area of our stack, but we are currently stabilized inside of this section. So we can either reapply the match move and then stabilize again for the front of this the shirt, or we can stabilize our head section here, which is probably what we're going to end up doing. So we need this to live with inside of the same rasterized resolution layer. And as I mentioned earlier, I rendered this out as 1920 by 1080 instead of the 2048 by 1080. Now that's not a huge problem for us here. it just means that we need to reformat our work. So I'm going to add in a reformat node, and it's just using our root, which is already set to 2048 by 1080. That was something we did on a previous live stream. And now if we go look at this, you'll notice that it's just chopping the tops and bottoms here. And so the next thing we need to do is then make this set to height. And if we do that, you'll notice that it's just extending the left and right areas of our image. And then now, of course, we need to add a stabilize into it. So we'll just copy paste our stabilize, and then we'll just add another merge node in here. And this will merge it right over top of everything. Now, I don't know if I think I had that set to width yesterday when I tested this, and I think that worked better. So let's go ahead and play this back. Now we're viewing this as it's merged in over top of our footage here. So now let's just see if everything lines up. Okay, so now you'll notice that the image is moving around all wacky, and that's because it's currently stabilized. If we view the reapplied motion version of this, then you'll notice that everything will look more normal, but everything is currently lining up. Now, if we go ahead and view this is putting the shirt over top of it. I want to show you guys something real quick. So if we do that, you'll notice that there's some weird matte issues here, like the head goes below its own collar and stuff like that. That's going to be problematic. We need the collar to kind of be below the chin area, but also up in front of the throat area. And here's the really cool thing. We created crypto mats from our first from our render. So now we can actually isolate specific parts of our image. Let's go ahead and do that. So if we go look at our character here, we specifically want this probably to be behind the collar, and then we want this to be in front of the collar. It's just to create like that effect of like 3D-ism that we're doing. So what I'm going to do is before our reformat node, we're going to actually need to use a crypto mat to isolate specific parts of the layer. And that way we can actually drop things in, in like kind of like a 3D perspective of stuff. I don't want like this section here to be in front of the collar, but let's say everything above this part of the head here, if he's rotating his head downwards, we kind of want all of this upwards to be up in front of the collar, and then everything down here that we want the collar to be kind of like tucked in front of. So if we go ahead and view that real quick, we'll notice that we actually have all of these wonderful objects from our CryptoMat. This is how CryptoMats work. So all I have to then do is select certain parts of that CryptoMat. And if I go to the alpha channel, you'll notice that it creates an alpha layer of that stuff. So I just now need to go ahead and select all of the different objects that we created inside of our Blender scene that would be in front of that collar section. Cool. And then if we go ahead and just use this with a merge layer, we can isolate just that portion of the head versus the entire thing. I'm going to go ahead and reformat it the exact same way. Whoops. Below that merge node, and then we're going to go ahead and stabilize it as well. So the way our merge layer stacks are kind of happening is this is going in front of that painted out background section of the shirt, and then we then create the collar in front of it. But in front of this collar, before we do all of this match move, let's go ahead and move this down. We then have this other portion, which is the front of the jawline here, that we would like to merge this over top of. So again, we've got the painted out back collar, the whole head, then the collar, and then now our jawline, which is going to kind of go in front of everything there. And that right off the bat is going to fix a lot of our problems, because now everything is going to line up, and then it's going to go in front of, the bow tie and everything as he's looking down. I will say, when you see through here and you can kind of see like that collar back there and it's pretty light, that kind of throws me off. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in a grade node here. We could probably take, probably going to take, let's, instead of using a crypto mat, let's take the whole alpha of that entire thing here. I'm going to blur out the stabilization here. Let's do that. I'm going to go to the alpha channel. And if we blur it, it's going to kind of blur outwards. Okay, I'm going to go back over here. Now, let's look at this real quick. So this is, we probably want to use this alpha here as well. So we have this blur node. I'm going to add in another merge node. It's getting things a little complicated. We're going to use the mask of this. That way it's only creating the blur section of that. Yeah, that's probably about right. And then if we go into here now, we should be able to control just the alpha of specifically where that like shirt is going to be. I'm probably going to darken everything up a little bit. And then if we blur that a little less, probably blur it down to like 13 or something. That way we get some lighter areas. Then that can go in over top of everything. Merge that back in. Merge that back in. We are having, you know, some fun smudginesses that are happening, but that overall help sell that a little bit better. Okay, great. So that's going to just be like a nice little slight shadow. And we could adjust that a little bit more if we wanted to. But for right now, I'm just going to keep that as is, and then we can come back to it. I'd like to mess around a little bit with some of the color. If I add a grade node, you can just see what's going to happen now. I can make adjustments to pretty much everything, and it adjusts it both in front of that collar and behind the collar. That's where having, you know, that section will be useful. Here's a cool little trick that sometimes I do to help match things into your environment a little bit better. If we had a reference of what this was supposed to look like, which we don't, so we can't do it this way, but if we did have a reference of what this specific blue or this specific silver or black or any of that kind of stuff is supposed to look like in this specific environment, we can actually very easily map our colors to doing this. A lot of times in product renders, I end up doing things like this. You can use your black point, your white point, your lift, and your gain to basically map everything inside of your CG sequence here to the correct values. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's take the black point. This will just be like the ultramost black point on your shot here. So let's take this deep dark black that's within inside of the jaws, right? Okay, they got no light in there, but that's the most black that we have. And actually it's very dark. And if you look at our shot as a whole, is there anything in here that is as dark as that? Not really, actually. What you're doing is using this grade node, you're saying, hey, this value right here should be pure black. It's already really close to it, so we're not seeing a huge change, but let's say I did accidentally select something like that, it would crush all the values in that range right there to be pure black. Now, we don't want that, so we do want it to be this value here, which is right over here. And then for our highlights here, let's go ahead and just like bring this down and see what our uttermost white is. It's probably one of these paint sections, right? So let's go ahead and just select one of the paint areas here, and then we'll say this is our white point. Okay, probably going to select that. I'm going to disable this real quick, and then we're going to do it again. Always makes it a lot easier if you disable first, because then that way it's not checking the value that it's already seeing when it's swapping. So like if you say, hey, this is the white value, and then it peaks and then you're still clicking, then it'll set it back. Okay, now what you're going to see is it's actually making your whole of your image more mapped out to like the black and white values of like, hey, this is white, this is black, and then everything in between is going to kind of stretch itself to those different parts. And then now if I go over to our regular piece of footage here, we probably do want like this black that's down here. Like this is probably pretty close to the stuff that we want. So let's go ahead and change this lift value here to this. And then we're going to find our white highlights of our image, which honestly we could probably get from like this white cloth here. This again, this would be so much easier if we actually went and had color charts done of this shot. If we had color charts, if we had, you know, our reference of what our robot head would look like in that specific lighting. If we had any of those things, we could actually map this way better. But since we don't, we're going to use what we have inside of our scene. I'm probably going to select this guy down here. So we'll select the gain here, and I'll set it to this value. Now I'm going to assume that because this is a little yellowishy, it's going to screw up our colors over here, but let's just see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to disable our adjustments on our framing there, and then now if we do that, you'll notice that right off the bat everything kind of like warms up our colors of our robot head. It makes it less cool, like Hasselhoff was talking about earlier. And it kind of overall matches it. Now, we're also getting some adjustments inside of our background here. I don't know if you guys are noticing this or not, but our color values down here, let's select that area right there. We know that it's permanently selected. You notice how that is being adjusted? That's because our lift is adjusting our background as well. So I'm going to add another dot in over here inside of our node setup. And then I'm going to select the mask here and just use the mask of the alpha of our robot head. We don't want to be adjusting anything that's not our specific alpha of our robot. Okay. So now let's go ahead and do that again. And we'll notice that our color values are not changing, only our robot head itself. And that's going to map everything in quite a bit better. Now, let's say you didn't get a perfect map inside of your CG. Let's say that you didn't have like quite a perfect white, or you didn't have quite a perfect black, or something like that that you were able to select. For us, it was pretty easy. We had white paint and we actually had a black section of our robot head. You can always adjust the mix values here just to get like the rough amount of mix that you want to have, because maybe it's not 100% correct, but it's pretty close. You're just trying to get things into the world. And so what we can do is we can actually go into our specific channels. Let's say I only want to select the red channels here, or let's actually go to the blue channels, because we know, for instance, that the blue channel is a little hot. Now, another thing to keep in mind is this is the only blue thing inside of the entire shot. So it will be more hot than it probably would otherwise look like. And we don't have a reference of what that should be. But what I can do now is I can actually go here to the white point and I can adjust this and then bring that down a little bit, right? Maybe I want it to sit a little bit lower. And then I can go into this next one and I can make this green. And then if I go to the green channel, I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. And then I'm going to go to the red channel. Does the red channel look good? Maybe I need another grade node, and then I'm just going to adjust just the red channel. And so now if I go back over here, you'll notice that what we're kind of doing is we're manually mapping this stuff ourselves. So I'm going to take this, okay? So this is our robot head now that we've got. And honestly, I'm pretty happy with how everything is, though you'll notice that it doesn't quite match. Now, this is because we rendered it out the same resolution as the rest of our footage. And so the rest of our footage has kind of like a bit of this like smudginess to it almost, right? Like it's got like this weird, not sharp, quite thing to it. Whereas the CG stuff is super tack, super sharp, super beautiful. And that is just something that happens when you're creating CG renders, is that the CG itself is going to be super sharp compared to everything else. So there's a couple ways to do this. First of all, you could just use like a blur node. I don't personally like the way blur blurs, in my opinion. I think blurs not fun. I like the Z defocus method of blurring, and then really not doing that much of a blur. Like this is quite a bit of blur. Let's bring this down to like a really small value. And then let's see, we're probably not going to want to do it on that stack because I think it's screwing up the rest of our reformat stuff. Let me delete this and paste this here. Does that work? And we're just going to add in a little bit more ZD focus. And then let's reformat all that stuff, paste this down here. And then I'm actually going to, we'll add in an expression here, so that way I just only have to do this once. So we're going to call this ZD focus 1 dot size 1.36. It shouldn't be 1.36. It should be, oh, that's 2.3. Weird. Okay, so we're going to go into here. We're going to do add expression. And we'll do ZD focus 1 dot size. And then that's going to link the two of these together. So now if I make any adjustments to this one, it's going to adjust both those at the same time. So now what we're trying to do right now is we're going to try to smudge this just as much as this. You can kind of already tell, like we've already got it pretty close, you know, like it's not quite there. It's maybe a little too much. So we're going to dial that back a little bit. And then the other thing I'd like to do, and this is probably what I should have done before I copy pasted our node here, is I'm going to set this to bladed. I think that just looks a little bit more realistic sometimes. And then I'm going to we'll keep the aspect ratio as 1. Although I just did a film that was done in anamorphic. So if you need to adjust this, you could set this to like a 1.5 or something like that. And that's going to stretch out your defocus in a different way. And you can map it to how everything else is done. We have these LED lights, and we've got, some of this kind of like specular highlights at the top of the head. We want to make sure that this kind of stuff actually blooms the way the rest of our camera blooms, the way everything else in our whole shot is blooming. And the way for us to do that is what we're going to need to do is isolate those sections and plus that bloom back on top of it. So I'm going to use let's use a glow node. One of my favorite nodes, okay, is the glow node here. And we're going to take this glow node, and right now it's just applying glow to everything, which looks really bad and really ugly. So there's some cool tricks that we can do to try to isolate specific sections and then plus that back on top of everything. First of which, I like to use effect only. If you're using effect only, it's going to only give you the sections of your image that are being affected and then give you only that as the effect. And so what we can then do is then merge this back on top of our footage using a plus operator. But we need to isolate those specific sections, okay? And that's where we use our tolerance. So I'm probably going to use a tolerance of something like a 0.5, okay? Somewhere like right here in the middle. So that way we're only getting kind of the most highlighted sections of our shot. We're going to change our brightness here to about 0.7. Whoops, I accidentally mistyped. I'm going to set that to about 0.75. And then we're also going to change our saturation as well to about 0.75. And so now what we're going to do is we only have kind of like that highlighted section there. And I'm going to change the size of this to something quite a bit smaller. Now, if I go ahead and grab this and merge this back over top of everything, I'm going to do that down here where the rest of our image is. Now, it's a black image with our highlights. So what we need to do then is use a plus. And now you'll notice that it's going to add like this extra little nice bloom to everything else. The reason why I did this all the way down there instead of before that robot head merges is because I wanted it to bloom over areas that were not the robot head, right? And that's essentially what we're trying to do. And now we can adjust the amount that this is merging here. I probably go with something about there. 0.72 looks nice. That's just going to give us that extra little bloom to the rest of our shot. We're just trying to match like the amount of bloom that other parts of the image that have heavy highlights on are getting. So yes, that's good. Now let's add another glow node in. I think this probably take another glow node of let's change the tolerance here and then do effect only again. This time I'm probably going to have less of a tolerance. Let's do like a 0.02. So this is kind of just like everything in general. And then again, I'll probably just do the brightness here. Let's do half brightness with half of saturation. So a real black and white version of that. I'll set this to like a 20 or something like that, which blurs it quite a bit. Again, effect only. Merge this as the A over top of... I'll actually probably put this before our other merge, okay? And again, let's do this as a plus. And we'll mix this over top of everything. About half, probably. Like that. Something really subtle, but it's totally there. I'm going to use... And we're going to do a couple things here. First of all, we're going to use a crypto matte, all right? So create another crypto matte, similar as before. And we have that whole flat section of the eyes that we can... isolate. So instead of using objects, we're going to use materials, and you'll notice that we actually have this as a separate material. So we can go ahead and select that, and now we've got just that area as an alpha channel. And so if I add another glow node in, if we add another glow node in, like so, let's see, we're going to change the tolerance here to that probably. If we use a merge node, just with that, I'm going to reformat all that jazz just like everything else. Now we just have the section of the eyes here. We can change the size of this and the amount of brightness that this stuff has. And then again, we just take this whole thing and we merge it over top of the rest of our image with another plus. Now we can just change the amount of glow that we're doing here. So what we're doing is we're still isolating the bright areas, but then we're using a merge node here to mask out everything except for the section of the eyes. Let's go look at this real quick. So we actually do have quite a bit of noise in the shot. This is how I do this stuff now. I actually, guys, I bit the bullet. All right. I did it. I bought Neat Noise. Okay. 1000% recommend it. I have it at like my actual day job. We use Neat Video all the time. It's the freaking best. It's just a little pricey. I'm not going to lie. It's a little pricey, but 1000% worth it. So I finally got it so that way I could have it on my home computer. I'm actually going to, let's just use auto profile real quick. Okay, use that gray section. That's probably a good section to do. And so then now what we're going to do is we applied that noise into our shot here. And then you can see, oh my God, look at that. Completely denoises our shot to this pristine camera shot without any noise in it, guys. This is freaking amazing. Now, one thing I recommend is, since we're using this as our source here, it's a little heavy on your comp. So I like to render it out again. So we're going to do that. And then we'll just replace this top with this read node from here. So I'm going to take this this image up here. What I usually like to do is then just grab this and bring it to the bottom of our comp. Yeah, let's do that. And then I'm going to put a dot here. Let's just try to, all of this was just extra, but I'm just putting that down there. Okay. Our view layer. And then we've got our initial grained EXRs here that we're rendering out into this denoise. You leave that there if you ever need a re-render. Totally great way of doing that. Otherwise, we're going to add in DOS grain, which again, you can grab. It's just a nice little node. I'm going to go ahead and add in a dot here. And so our degrained plate that we have, we plug into that there. And then our regular plate, this is going to be your grained plate. So you have your degrained plate and then you have your grained plate, and these should just match each other. Okay. And then grab this degrained plate here. And then we're just going to go ahead and plug this all the way at the top. Great. So now if we go into our DOS grain here, you'll notice that this right here has your degrained stuff. Oh my goodness. I just realized also what's going on. Our clean plate that we had, you should really do this before everything. But when I started this live stream tutorial series, I didn't own Neat Video. So now that I have it, I am using it. But that also means that I might need to redo some of my stuff, because our digital matte painting that we created does actually have grain inside of it. It's actually got a bunch of ugly guggy stuff inside of it too. I'll probably add a frame range in. I don't know why the reduced grain isn't doing anything. What we can do though, okay, so this is just clean plating everything. So this is creating your digital matte painting source. Since this is already clean plated here, let's actually recreate our clean plates, because this needs to be done right. You notice how that's clean now? Beautiful. So now I'm going to go all the way to the bottom here. And what we're really trying to do is recreate some of this other sections. So I'm just going to select these guys, and then we're just going to hit generate again. It's probably the easiest way of doing this. We just have to regenerate everything. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and export this now as a new PNG. And let's go ahead and re-import our digital matte painting. Okay, now let's go back to the bottom of our comp here for everything. And you'll notice that we have this ugliness there, and that's because of our digital matte painting. So now if we replace our digital matte painting, should have everything super clean now. Okay, so under DOS grain now, I'm going to go ahead and set up the grain settings so that way we can reapply our grains. This is what the shot looked like before with all of its kind of ugly grain, not gonna lie, but sometimes you like that ugly grain. And a lot of productions, by the way, they want your grain to match 1-for-1. So what we're gonna do is we're literally gonna do that. We're going to copy the grain from this shot here, compare it to our degrained version of our shot, and then reapply the grain. I don't know if you guys can see that too well on the live stream, but that's what it's doing, right? This is grained version, non-grained version. So now if we go to our DOS grain, we can go ahead and compare the two elements. And what we're going to do is we're going to use replace, we're going to use active, and it's going to give us this little box here, and probably just line this right up here with the background section of our grain, and that's all good. And then analysis, we're going to go into here and we're going to analyze. And it's just going to analyze the two different pieces of footage, both the red, green, and blue channel, not both, all three, the red, green, blue channel, and then it's going to recreate that grain. And so now if we have this grain, we can disable it and re-enable it, and that works really nicely. We can compare it to the original grain and just see how well it duplicated everything over. And it looks pretty dang close, guys. It looks pretty dang close. Let's go ahead and render this out. I'm going to show you guys how to cut this back into our editorial sequence that we have. So after our DOS grain, we're going to want to render this out as our final shot. There's a couple things to note. If you're doing any type of these match move things where the camera's moving and weird stuff, I like to reapply the alpha so that way there's not any weirdness inside of it. So let's go ahead and just do some of the stuff that I would normally do before I send this back over to the DI, which is the digital intermediate where they color grade and everything like that, or it goes back to editorial or whatever. A better way of doing it, expression node and 1 in the alpha. We're going to try it. We're just going to test this out even. So let's go here, and that's our thing. So technically that's the alpha of our image. Yo, that's actually super cool. Hasselhoff, this is why I keep you around, man. Expression node with 1 in the alpha. Holy cow. You know, of course there's a node for it. I was just overcomplicating it. As per usual. Overcomplicating it. That's the name of the game for me, I guess. Normally I split this off to 2 different sections. I have a proxy render that I can create as well as EXRs, but for us I'm just going to render this out specifically. I do want to show you guys one cool thing. So let's just say this is going to a colorist, right? And maybe they want to make some slight tweaks and adjustments to specific parts. Overall, you may want to send just the robot head to them, in which case we can use a shuffle node. And with this shuffle node, let's just create a dot here that I can connect stuff to. We may want just the head, okay? So this is just maybe the eyes, right? Maybe they do want just the eyes. Maybe they want just the big portion of the head or something like that. I don't know. But you can apply this to any part of the stack of any of the alphas, right? And so this is just going to give us all of the head, okay? And maybe all of the head's good, but maybe you want the collar to be cut out. So let's just add a merge node in here. I'm going to do this exactly how I would normally do this, right? So we're going to do that, and then let's say this whole number, we're then going to actually have to stabilize it and all that jazz. So that stabilizes it. And this reformat node, let's plug into the top up here. Use a dot as well, so that way I can hide the input. And then here, we're just going to put a merge node in. And then this merge node will take the collar, his front collar here. Let's take that guy, and we're just going to chop it out. And we'll say invert that selection. So now we have just the areas that the collar is not in front of. And that's the entirety of the head, okay? So let's just say we wanted to feed now this into our whole stack. So we're going to do another match move, copy another match move here, place that at the bottom. So now we've got just that, and that's going to go into this shuffle here. I'm just going to again move everything down. So now if we go to our shuffle node, from this A input, we're going to take just the alpha, and I'm going to create a new mask layer, call this new, and then we're going to call this, let's just do robot head alpha, okay? And now we can swap that directly into there. You'll notice that under our RGBA now, we have robot head. That's a separate channel that the colorist will be able to use to actually grade stuff. And that's very useful sometimes. So you can give just the eyes, you can give just maybe the ears or different parts. That's really useful, actually more so in animation. Now, you'll notice that if we go to our right node, okay, we now need to render out our EXRs. So I'm going to go ahead and render this to an output folder. So let's create a new folder out here called comp. I'm just going to call this VFX underscore comp. I'm going to do create directory is going to be the setting here. Now this is super important. Right now, if we go back up here, you'll notice that we only have the RGB channels. We don't have anything else. Now, why is that? Oh, which, by the way, we're going to want to add a crop node in here so that way we're not rendering out any extra data on the sides. But we'll notice that we only have our RGB channels. We don't have that robot head that we created. And that's because under our channels here, we are not selecting the robot head. We are only selecting RGB. So we could easily do this by just saying all channels. And now it's going to render out specifically the RGBA as well as the robot head. If there were any channels that you don't want to render, you can do the remove channel one. And you can remove stuff very easily. That's just a way of doing that. Again, we're going to render this out as default scene linear. I'm going to go ahead and open up DaVinci Resolve. And so that way we can bring in our VFX shot and cut that in. Okay, so here's our whole shot. Now everything is being viewed weirdly right now. And that's just because our color management settings are using our output as ACES CG. We just swap this back to like Rec 709 or something like that. Very easy. Let's swap that back. Boom. Now we can see everything inside of our shot. But we still have our other dude. Hey man, you're not supposed to be there. But this is our shot that, or our sequence that we're editing. And we want to put our robot here instead of this guy. Okay. We don't want this guy here anymore. All right. So we'll go to our media tab here and we're just going to find our VFX shot. So here's our VFX shot that we have. Now you're going to notice everything here, this VFX shot is super dark. And so it doesn't match everything at all. And that's as expected because DaVinci Resolve doesn't know what the heck to do with it right now. Now, all we have to do with our footage now that we've dropped this guy in is we just have to right click this and then we just go to input color space is basically what we need to do. ACES input transform. And right now it's thinking that it's 709 footage when we know it's not. We know that it's ACES CG footage. First of which, we can swap our color science out just to color managed. We can uncheck the automatic color management settings. And then I like to have it set to Rec 709 2.4 gamut. Okay. This is now still going to look correct because the input color space of this stuff, we can swap this over here. You see that says Rec 709. This is all selected as Rec 709. Now our footage here, we just need to be able to tag this guy. So we just right click that, go to input color space, tag this as ACES CG. And voila, that should match pretty closely. The only reason why it wouldn't match perfectly is if this footage here is tagged incorrectly, which is very possible that it is. Let's go back over here to input and then set this to Rec 709. There it is, Rec 709 2.4 gamut. Let's go back over here, input. I don't know, for some reason it's all the way under miscellaneous. Rec 709 2.4 gamut. So now if you look at the two of these should match pretty dang close, which I don't, again, not quite sure why they're not matching perfectly. They should. I have to look into that. The Rec 709 thing's throwing me off. But there you go. There's our sequence cut in. Let me log in. I have this subscription to Universal's music for creators website. And then they have a whole sound effects library that we can work with as well. Let's explore the sound effects. Let's go here, bar. We're going to start with this. Let's do disco music background. Okay, and then next up, let's do playback real quick and then do caching. Let's see, render cache, user. And then I'm going to select this guy and then do render cache color output. Booyah, baby. So we're just going to cache that. And then let's select this, go to the audio settings for it. Oh my gosh, we're going to adjust the... this is so much. Basically need to EQ this, right? Let's do wiping count. How do you... Oh my god. Oh my god, wiping counter. Let's do that. We're layering it, guys. We're layering it. I need like hydraulics or something like that. I kind of want the robot sounds. That's what we're going for, guys. We need a robot sound here. Let's also, for this, I was going to do this from the very beginning. 235 cropping. Voila, voila. Next up, let's see. Did I have a transform on that at all? I don't think I did. But we're going to transform that down a little bit. Okay, for purposes of myself, we're going to also render out a proxy version of this. Because this is going to editorial, right? Editorial don't need no crap where it's not rendering and all that stuffs. Okay, so proxy.mov. And then I'm going to just output this as 709. Totally cool. Render, render, render. Global. That's all good to go. Render that. Let's go to the comp folder here, and I'm just going to import the proxy. And then we just want to snap that, so that way I could just replace it pretty easily. There we go. And then let's see if I can get like a rotating piece. Let's blend that in over top of everything here. Then slow that down slightly. Let's do like a 80%. Maybe a little slower, a little quieter too, you know? That's looking like it's pretty good to me. I think that's going to be it for this. This is looking pretty solid to me. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. What do you guys think? I'm really happy with how this turned out. I want to give a special shout out to our other wonderful Patreon members here. You guys are super awesome. You guys help make these live streams run and everything like that. That's it for today's live stream. We'll be back next week with a brand new live stream. So if you guys are new here, make sure to hit the subscribe button below so that way you guys get notified and when we go live again. If you guys have anything particular that you guys would like to see, make sure to leave a comment below of something that you guys would like to watch. Yep, see you next time. Thank you guys so much for joining, and hope you guys have a great rest of your Sunday. Get some rest, and start sharing some stuff over in the Discord. I'm loving seeing Hasselhoff's been posting some amazing works over there, and some of you guys else have been as well. And it's really awesome to see what you guys are creating and what you guys are working on. Hey, you guys have a good one, and stay creating. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.